A lot of people ask us, is Nawaz Sharif the right guy or is Zardari the right guy at the moment, right? And we funnily say, no, of course not. But in your own argument, if you want to talk about getting steps closer to a mature democracy, you would rather go for a party that is capable of bringing change and is also capable of staying independent, right? So PTI and Imran Khan might not be the obvious solution, but neither would be all the independents that people try to vote for just because they thought that they will make a change, but they will not. You will have to rely on the dirty politics that is already happening because they're the only ones in power right now that they can help shape the system, like build another chart of democracy of sorts, and then pave the way for actually idealistic candidates that people, you and I, would believe in. Could bring in a new or usher in a new era of democracy. So Pakistan has to go through the dirt and is what I'm hearing from you. It's not that I'm saying that that is what you're saying, but that's what I'm hearing. It has to go through the dirty side before it can come out. Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the weekly Bustle. I am on a roll today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my third podcast recording in one day. I am enjoying it a lot and I am having fun. But the benefit of doing all of this stuff is that you get to take these different perspectives and you bring them into the conversation. And today I'm going back to Pakistan to discuss it with my good friend Mudassir. And it has been a wonderful journey of what Pakistan has been going through. Well, wonderful is not really the right way to say it, actually, but it's a journey that Pakistan
Fascinating.
has been going through. Yes, with the recent elections that have gone by, the whole politics that is happening behind it, and it is no person in the world, let alone in Pakistan, is now like without a doubt believes that it is not a democracy that is fully functioning at the moment. There are certain elements of the democracy that are being controlled by a certain thing we call the establishment. So I want you to talk us through the democratic landscape of Pakistan and what is happening and why is it happening. And from there, let's take it into discussing the conversation about, does it even make sense for countries like Pakistan, who are not that educated, not that mature in their demographics, to be trying to work like a democracy where you actually need an educated population. And then we move over to actually discussing the West, where you do have a mature population with educated people, and even their democracy is showing their cracks. So I want to discuss both of them. I want to understand how things work. So let's start with the first topic. Let's start with what is the establishment and what actually happened in the elections of 2024.
Okay, so the establishment is so basically political parties come and go through elections. Every 5 years, they go into this election cycle, and the people decide which ones they want to vote for. The establishment is something that isn't directly decided by the people, but it's something that these elected representatives then get to decide. Again, it's a complicated process how they get into power, but more or less they are the ones that stay at the helms of it. And in the case of Pakistan, they actually have a lot of control. And if this establishment somehow get together, like if you have the judges in your control, if you have the bureaucracy in your control, which in Pakistan's case, it's with the army, you get to control a lot of the country without being the elected representative for the country. And what's been happening is, and although it's been happening since the inception of this country, which was 1947, that either directly or indirectly the army has had its control over Pakistan. We did see a change that army was taking sort of a backseat because we saw the charter of democracy happening, which was between the Pakistan People's Party and Pakistan Muslim League Noon. They were the two biggest party at that time. It was around 2004 or 2005 that they decided that they'll fight each other, but they won't take the army's side to topple each other's government. So that was going really well from 2008 to 2013. Pakistan People's Party ruled the country, and then from 2013 to 2018, PMLN had their share of power. But between 2013 and 18, there was this new force, which again, as people found out, that it was also being controlled by the army. That new force was given a lot of powers by the army. I remember this was this 2014 Dharna where from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., it was all Imran Khan at the show. Whatever he had to say, we had to watch it at night, and then the rest of the day there was this analysis going on what you're saying, and then through different measures he grew. Initially, then he was finally got power in 2018. The opposition parties, like always, this happens. They accused a lot of rigging and a lot of manipulation because PMLN leaders were fired, PPP leaders were fired. So it was like it was political engineering being done.
Mm.
So then that happened. Now we're in 2024. And I think nobody would argue that PTI is the strongest party, but now they've fallen off the establishment. So they don't want them in power, even though they have won the majority of the seats. And the government, which was previously in power, after there was this vote of no confidence against Imran Khan, they're in power again. So this is a very short form of a very, very complicated story that's going on. But
Mm.
I'd love to know what aspect of democracy would you want to discuss in this case?
So, so what I really enjoyed in what you were saying right now was that the People's Party, Pakistan People's Party, and Pakistan Muslim League tried to take back control of the country against the establishment or the army of sorts by actually debating that okay, we're gonna fight each other, but we're not gonna enlist any help from the army to topple each other's governments. But then we see that they both got one share of the government, one term of the government before the army stepped back in. Could you really say that's democracy? Or was this just a quid pro quo that, okay, you lead now and then I will lead then, and then we're just going to keep exchanging our things? Because what has happened in Pakistan for so long that I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have these dynastic politics that's going on, right? So that is also not democratic by nature, that you have these parties that were based on around these one or two individuals whose families and extended families are still ruling that party, and now that has become the face for for Pakistan People's Party. It was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, then his daughter, and now his son-in-law, and now his grandson is now the face of the party. Pakistan Muslim League was founded by Nawaz Sharif and his brother Shahbaz Sharif, and now that family is still ruling that party. PTI was ruled by Imran Khan, and now Imran Khan is in jail, and now we just have basically announced another prime minister of the country, which we have never heard of before. At least I've never heard of before in mainstream politics. Uh, but most people are really hoping for Imran Khan to come back, because now it's not about parties or it's not about policies. It's not about manifestos, which is the ground, basically the ground rules of democracy. It's about the person. So it's a very thin line between with the democracy that we have in Pakistan versus the authoritarianism that we actually want to see in Pakistan. Everyone talks about Imran Khan getting full majority so he can actually show what he's capable of. That does not sound like democracy. That doesn't sound like diplomacy of any sorts. And we have debated in our friend circle a lot that this guy was never about democracy. He never liked to play with other parties. He never liked to enjoy the guardrails that were put in place in a democratic terms. He wanted absolute power, and he still does. I think recently you shared something, and I do not know why in our group no one really had an uproar about this. That he wrote a letter to the IMF to stop funding for Pakistan over rigged elections because he wanted the country to go into default rather than actually let the country survive, all because he lost his power. I cannot believe a person like that is getting popular support, but none of this behavior is democratic by any sense. So that is what I want to talk about. How do we fix this? And like the question is not even how do we fix this? The question is why is this happening in the first place? And then does democracy even make sense?
Uh, this is a very big question and probably can have a podcast of its own. But I'll try to summarize it as much as I can. So basically, I would look at it as a product. I know you've studied a bit of commerce, and I hope a lot of people that are watching also understand this. Is there's this product cycle where initially, when you make a product which is revolutionary or even is a different product from what the competitors are making, the first product is always very new. The company that is making it is itself learning about it. It's learning how to make it. It's learning how to master the economies of skills for it. So as you build iterations of that product, or you just continue building it, you start understanding how to do it. and after it completes that life cycle, the product life cycle is completed, you finally understand and you master it. The problem is Pakistan is trying to have a mature democracy, but every time we're on the path to getting mature, something stops it. And obviously, that something is always, almost always controlled by the army. So either it's empowering another force, it's either dividing the parties that are ruling it, or through any shape whatsoever, trying to divide these parties so that the army stays in power. So every time we try to take one step forward, we take two steps back. So it's very easy to criticize that we have dynastic politics. For example, Imran Khan is losing support of its party. I know, unlike other parties, it's not very much driven by some common incentive. It's more like driven by a single person. Imagine if Imran Khan had his son or daughter who could rule this party. Imran Khan might have not lost this power. He could have easily, like, he did go into jail, but if the army wanted to break the party, they would have said that yes, sure, Imran Khan would be in jail, and that's how we would control it. But then there's his son or daughter who would try to lead the party in that crucial time, because most of the members of his party have left it, and even now the independent candidates that did come into power or did won the election, they're falling apart. That's because it's not, there's no one to control it when that person is not there. So when the army tries to break you, there's no choice but to have your own family try to lead it from there onwards. So I think that is one part you have to understand, and the other part that you said, that eventually the same parties are ruling, or Imran Khan would let the country go into default rather than trying to save it over his own will to gain power. The problem is, again, it's everything isn't perfect. If someone came to power all because of someone else's support, I don't think that that qualifies as a good person. So judging onto morality of that person that is coming to power, I don't think it matters at this point. What matters is we could strive towards building that mature democracy and keeping these establishment or forces that try to control it or ruin it at bay. That's the best we can do right now.
I think I understand this. The dynastic politics and the scheme behind it, I never understood. So that's good that you cleared it out for me. So that makes a little bit more sense. And what I hear from you, it actually makes people like me still be okay with the dynastic politics that is happening and the mature parties that are already standing. A lot of people ask us, is Nawaz Sharif the right guy or is Zardari the right guy at the moment, right? And we funnily say, no, of course not. But in your own argument, if you want to talk about getting steps closer to a mature democracy, you would rather go for a party that is capable of bringing change and is also capable of staying independent, right? So PTI and Imran Khan might not be the obvious solution, but neither would be all the independents that people try to vote for just because they thought that they will make a change, but they will not. You will have to rely on the dirty politics that is already happening because they're the only ones in power right now that they can help shape the system, like build another chart of democracy of sorts, and then pave the way for actually idealistic candidates that people, you and I, would believe in. Could bring in a new or usher in a new era of democracy. So Pakistan has to go through the dirt and is what I'm hearing from you. It's not I'm saying that is what you're saying, but that's what I'm hearing. It has to go through the dirty side before it can come out. Or we can wait or wish for a benevolent dictator in the army who comes in, who realizes that this is not right and gives Pakistan complete autonomy. But I feel like that will never happen. And even if it does, who's to say if the complete autonomy is given that the democratic system is mature enough to actually handle it and not become corrupt by itself?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't understand the question you're trying to ask.
No, there were no questions. It was just like a statement
Okay.
that I'm basically trying to understand. I'm trying to understand more over about this. That if you don't have a mature democracy like Pakistan doesn't, we have to accept the cuts and the dirty politics that happens, which we are, right? Now the goal is for us to move away from army or establishment politics and focus on just getting a mature democracy in place, and that would mean to play by still these dirty dynastic policies that are happening. So my question, if you want me to ask a question, my question following up to this is, then does it make sense for Pakistan to still stay a democracy if we are not able to handle, if you're not able to stand on our four legs, like a chair on the four legs, not our four legs, but like if you're not, if the seat of democracy is not able to stand on its four legs, does it make sense to keep trying for democracy?
I think, like I've said this about a million times if if you ever interacted with me, but uh, I know it's not perfect, but we don't have a better alternate solution. The point is, like even if I agree with you that we're not having a democracy in our country, and we'll go with some other sort of solution, and I don't know how would we implement it, because again, any other solution would automatically lead to someone that could have the power, and that is only the army. So you're basically suggesting another martial law, which we've had so many of them, and we already know that they do not work, at least not for us. So I don't think there's an easy way out of this. Like there's no other choice that we have.
You know what confuses me about this is proponents of democracy, especially the elite and the educated, always say, this is the way, and democracy functions as self cleaning and self serving. I think those are the words you've also used sometimes, right? It's self correcting
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
happens,
So
but it is not feasible for a country. That's my opinion. It's not feasible for a country like Pakistan, as you said, where the system is not mature enough to actually be self-correcting. And the system is not mature enough for us to wish for these things. For me, what bothers me and annoys me a lot is that this system of governance that is established in one place of the world, we look at it and we go like, this is what we want, this is the perfect way to govern. We're not sure. It doesn't mean it's perfect because it works there. The dynamics are different, the maturity is different, even the systems are different. Capitalism, for example, capitalism also is a great system that works in the West, and look how rich they are. But is it a great system? No. We're now realizing the limits of capitalism, and like, okay, this is exploitative to the nature, till an extent. So same goes for democracy. That just because it's good and there's rights of the people involved, and those are the libertarian beliefs we want to believe in because we are told that in a way, doesn't make it good for people in our country, because in our country people are not mature enough to understand the concept of rights and freedoms and beliefs yet. And I'm not saying uh, we have this you can say responsibility to control them, or no, we know better than them, because no, who are we to decide? But the problem is then we're falling into the same ideological
trap.
basis, yes, that we have learned from a certain part of the world. And that's the problem. I was listening to a podcast about Slavoj Zizek. He's this philosopher who's apparently crazy, they call him. They call him the modern day Socrates. And what he always does is he always tries to take an ideological stance and then turn it on his head to show you that no ideological stance makes sense, that all that we're doing in our world is coming from a lens. And the lens that we wear right now, you and I, and most people who are debating about this pro democracy, is the lens of the European systems, of the Western systems, that look, this is the way to live. Rights matter, people's individualities matter, this matters, that matters. In our eyes, it does. That's what we believe it, but it is still an ideological system. Who is to say humans were always created equal? There was never a saying like that in the past either. You had roles and systems. So what I'm trying to say, if I bring that conversation here, is that this ideological lens clouds our judgment when we're looking for a mature system that works for a country like Pakistan. And the problem right now is we don't have a working system, and then we only resort to democracy because that is supposed to be the best. Like, I think the code that you're making is also a code from the West somewhere, that, oh, democracy is a very bad system. It's the best, but it's the best amongst the rest. Kind of a code, right?
Yeah, that's somewhere
So,
along the way.
so,
Yeah.
so what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So you've recently become a parent. It's not so recent at this point, but still, you have a very young baby at your house.
Yeah.
Uh, you're definitely trying to teach her as much as you can. You
Yeah.
would want her to know the world. You would want her you would want her you would want to protect her, but you would also want her to know, to learn things on her own. So do you always go and, like, if she's falling down, obviously you'll try to protect her, but like there's this style of parenting which now most parents are embracing and the world is embracing, is like, let them go into this world and try to learn themselves. Like they'll throw them into the swimming pool and let them swim for a bit. I know it would be difficult for you as a parent to watch, but you let them do it. You let them fall sometimes, because eventually they'll find out if you're doing this wrong, if you're running this way, it's not the right way. They'll have a lot of hiccups, they'll have a lot of problems in the way, but you let them learn their own way. If you come and try to protect them again and again, they wouldn't learn. And same is the case with democracy. Yes, it wouldn't be ideal, and I know it's very easy to say that the West wants to do it, and it's their agenda, and it wouldn't work for anyone else. But don't we do the same thing with our kids? We let them learn by themselves, and then they mature, and then they make better decisions as they grow up. They don't make the same mistakes again. They don't go on to slippery places and try to run. They run correctly because they've learned it as a kid, and their parents have allowed them to learn. So that's the argument I would like to present.
No, but here I already see a rebuttal that you're comparing a parent letting their child independently decide for themselves to democracy and letting Pakistan play out its democracy. But why? Who's to say that is the right way? That's the independent way of working. What if you leave the people of Pakistan, they go into anarchy and they decide authoritarianism is our way to go? Then it's their independent choice, right? And we don't talk about that. We think democracy is the only way moving forward, because when we talk about rights and independence, democracy comes in our head because everything else is not good. And the example that I'm going to bring is China. China is leading the world right now and of course, at the moment, China is not doing really well, to be honest. They're actually in a state of deflation right now, and the economy is a mess because of the whole real estate crisis that's happening. And the corruption is rampant in China. It's not like it isn't, but they are all collectively agreed that okay, we are okay with a supreme leader, we're okay with this concept of authoritarianism because it is giving us what we want, which is economic prosperity. Once we become mature enough that economic prosperity is not the only thing we want in life but something else, then we're going to think of a regime change. But for now, economic prosperity is what we want, and anyone who's willing to promise this to us gets the power from us. That's the premise that people in China are okay with, and that's the premise under which a lot of atrocities are also happening in China. And people are okay with it because people look at aggregates, like governments look at it in aggregates. Democracy is a system which also should be working in principle in aggregates, but we really get bogged down into the individual details. Now it's about everyone. And in Pakistan, that's the problem. Like, you want to focus on this, you want to focus on that, you want to focus on this. What is the bare minimum? A capitalist society says economics, economic prosperity. You give everyone education, you give everyone money, they will know what to do with it. That's what a lot of funding and charities also say. Okay, stop making decisions for people, give them the money, they will know what to do with it, right? So who's to say that if you leave the people of Pakistan to decide, they will choose democracy?
I think that is okay. So there are different aspects of your argument. So I'll try to answer them one by one. So first of all, you said that maybe the people of Pakistan want an authoritarian regime. That's not true, because if you look at the results of the elections over the past few decades, it's always the party that's against the army that wins the election, or at least gains most popularity. Even now, although PTI had almost no funding, it had no leaders. Most of its party, like the leaders that were there, were either in jail or were in some sort of custody, and other leaders had left the party. Yet, without the political campaigning or the funding, they managed to win the most seats. So it's not true that Pakistanis want an authoritarian regime, because we've had so many that we're tired of them. And now the people have seen how this control is affecting them. Like, I would argue that the way they've learned is also a little flawed, but the people know that they don't want an authoritarian regime.
But
That's
no, but
the
they,
first thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
continue.
you go
Then
ahead.
I would say,
No, I was moving to the second aspect of the
yeah, that's what
argument.
I
So
mean.
you could.
So, okay,
Okay,
okay.
okay.
So let me give a
Uh,
rebuttal before you start the second one. But you're
okay.
right in your saying that the thinking is flawed. They don't want an authoritarian regime that they don't choose. They want an authoritarian regime that they do choose. So it's not democracy at the end of the day. They want Imran Khan. They don't want PTI. They don't want any Democratic Party. They want Imran Khan in majority. So he can pass the policies that they believe he's the supreme leader to do so. So it's authoritarianism in a cloak, in my eyes. Who's to say after 5 years he doesn't deliver, people are not going to be happy with him? Because you just
No,
saw that people were still happy with him no matter what happened to him.
no, that's not true. Uh, in almost every survey that was done during Imran Khan's regime, after like the 3 years that he did stay in power, he was losing support. In fact, if he was given the authority to complete the his 5 year tenure, I think most people would argue he wouldn't have won the next election because he was becoming massively unpopular. For like, if you want to win Pakistan, you have to win in Punjab, and in the province of Punjab, people were severely unhappy because the thing is, because you have to put a CM that uh, kind of is a puppet CM, because if you put someone in power that is very powerful, they wouldn't do a very good job. And then again, I would actually argue that they weren't actually prepared to rule the country. They were all about good, being or doing good marketing so that people would vote for them. They didn't have an actual plan because, for example, the finance minister that they had, Asad Umar, who was always seen as like, whenever PTI comes into power, he'll become the finance minister. He was taken out of job because he made a massive blunder. He predicted, or he wanted that they wouldn't go, Pakistan wouldn't go with the IMF to get the loan that they want or the funding that they want at that time. They would look to other avenues, which wasn't possible at all. Like, it was the stupidest mistake ever. So the point is, they didn't have a plan, and
Yeah.
if they had continued those 5 years, they wouldn't have stayed in power. What happened was, again, army took the chance. They took their hand off from PTI. So the vote of no confidence was easily going to pass because the people, even with their allies, because despite winning a lot of seats, they were still having a coalition government, which couldn't have continued because they didn't maintain good relations. So as soon as the army took their hand off, the government broke. I am very confident if it had stayed for 5 years, they wouldn't have won the next elections, even with the support of the army. And so, coming to the second point about China, I think initially that did help the people of the country because there was room for growth. The people were, what from what I've read, I could be wrong in this because my knowledge is still limited, that people weren't productive at all. So the leader, I'm forgetting his name, that is the revolutionary leader for China. What he did was he pulled them out of poverty because of his good policies and just pushing them to a point where they became productive. I know it's a much more complicated than that, but initially they had this room for growth, but now that dirt is falling onto other countries. They're sure and I could still argue that there a lot of their people aren't happy because a lot of choices that in Western world that have good democracy people have, they don't have it in China. But even if I for the sake of argument, I believe that they are happy, the dirt is going towards these African countries or those countries where they're going to for their investment purposes, and the sufferings are happening in other countries. Similarly, it's the case with Saudi Arabia. What is happening is their own people are super happy, but it's the cheap labor, it's the suffering that happens on other countries because of these policies. They would want to stay rich for as long as they can. They would change the crude oil prices as much as they want. They wouldn't care the other oil suppliers. They could be selling in a loss, but because it's such a big supplier of oil, Saudi Arabia, they can control it. Their people are still happy, but the people of other countries are at the receiving end of it. So I think you need to build a bigger picture if you want to say that the Chinese example or the Saudi example would work. I don't think it does.
Okay, 2 points. First thing about your surveys about PTI's popularity, I refuse to believe that peoples in villages and groundspeople are the ones who are conducting those surveys, who are doing those surveys. Surveys are mostly educated or upper middle class people who have access to internet, who have access to these things. Am I wrong or am I
No,
right?
you're wrong. Because these surveys are pretty accurate. They take the sample size of every demographic, and obviously they have their protocols in place to make sure every demographic is counted for. Obviously, nothing is 100% accurate. Even the surveys in USA isn't 100% accurate, but they are
Yeah,
pretty
but you're
accurate.
telling me that anyone who has an access to internet, who doesn't have access to internet, who lives in a village with like a few thousand people, also gets called for their surveys.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Then we can put this point aside because I didn't know much about it. So we'll put this point aside because I still struggle to believe that everyone on the ground is informed about what's happening in Pakistani politics. But you say so, so I'll believe it. So we'll park that on the side for now.
No,
We'll move on
I
to the
would
second
just
point.
want to add this a little bit. They're not informed. All they care about is their economic situation, which was worsening in PTI as well. Like you could still argue that like regardless of who was in power, their economic situation would have worsened given the state of economy we were in. But yeah, continue.
Okay. Okay. So second point about China. Uh, I don't like the comparison between China and Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia exploits cheap labor. China mostly
Mhm.
has its own people. So even if you talk about China going to Africa, they still bring their own people there. That's one of the reasons why African countries and other countries are actually mad at China, because they come in with their money, but also with their own people. So they don't create jobs in those countries. They come, they buy the piece of land, they build the infrastructure using Chinese labor, and then the Chinese labor goes back and they own that property. So what they're doing is basically neo-colonialism in a way, but it's in no way exploiting cheap labor of other countries. And on the topic of knock-on consequences of other countries, I don't think anyone cares about that. Do you think the Western countries care about that? The West doesn't care about the knock-on consequences, or else no proxy wars would be happening. So again, do you see what I'm saying, Anwar? We have this ideological lens that we're looking at, and with that ideological lens, we look at democracy as a functioning system that look it works. While we look at authoritarianism, we're like, look, it doesn't work because of these reasons. But those reasons are also applicable here. US is supporting blatant genocide happening in Israel. That is a democratic government. Europe is actually paying Turkey. France actually, right now, Germany paid Turkey, and France has been paying the governments of the Sahel, Mali, Niger, to actually stop people from reaching North Africa. Because if they reach North Africa, they take a boat and they come to southern Spain. They're paying people, and the the autocratic leaders of the Sahel, so literally militant leaders, they literally have had press conferences where they say those people of Europe have given us money to shoot you. They have given us guns to shoot you guys from crossing. So this is a democratic government. No, everyone cares about themselves. So if you tell me that the knock-on consequences of authoritarianism will be that Pakistan's people will be happy, but there will be some knock-on consequences in some other country, I don't think that's a valid argument in any form of system of governance, because you only look at yourself. We are not mature enough as a species to think globally yet. We're not. Even those people in the West who try to say we're global citizens, they're not. They're only looking at from their lens of ideological ideals, that they go like, oh, this is perfect. Look at this. Try this. But no, everyone looks out for themselves. That has always been the case. So Pakistani government that might, and I'm not saying authoritarianism is the only way, right? So it's not necessarily the only way. That's also again an ideological lens. That if not democracy, then what? Do we go authoritarianism? No. You and I have discussed federated societies. I have discussed anarchies. That okay, there is a federated anarchical system, a grassroots system, self-organizing societies. You have multiple different ways, especially in a country like Pakistan, a homogenous country like Europe. Even there, you're seeing problems. Homogenous countries in Europe are way different from the heterogeneous societies in Africa and Asia, because we have so many people, even Chinese people are quite homogenous till an extent. I do know that there are some other ethnicities happening around the borders of China, but the people generally, in my knowledge, are quite homogenous, so it works. Pakistan, India are quite heterogeneous. You have, as you said, Punjab, Sindh, KPK. So maybe the concept of a homogeneous government does not work for Pakistan. You should make this into a federated state where everyone just contributes a little bit to a federal government, but everyone is autonomous and doing their own thing. It doesn't need to be authoritarianism as the answer. What needs to be the answer is that what is the baseline we want to measure? And even there, our ideological lens comes in, right? That, oh, economic prosperity is the way to go. Countries like Norway, countries in Europe are challenging that notion now. They're not talking about economic welfare anymore. They're like, no, we have all the money in the world because now we know how to produce it. Norway took all the money from their oil proceeds, they put it into this $1 trillion fund, and now each citizen in Norway has 450,000 or 250,000 euros retirement fund in their basically part ownership in that fund, which is going to keep growing forever. It has become actually 11 to 13% of their GDP now. So they take out the money to pay for 11 to 13% of their yearly consumption. From that money, that will just keep growing forever. So there are multiple ways of looking at this. And I feel like just focusing on democracy is a very pink lensed way that we have been taught, that we have been seeing for so long. And that's what I want to discuss. I want you to basically think along with me that is this the only way? Is it just a binary between authoritarianism or democracy, or is there another way which a country like Pakistan can actually function in?
So I think on the first part, I think you make a very good point that even the Western world is exploiting other countries, and I agree with you. But in a world where a lot of developed countries are exploiting other countries, I would rather want to live in a world where, again, it sounds a little tone deaf, and I don't know if it's like it's not a solution, but at least I get to criticize it. I get it that US is empowering or supporting a genocide. It's horrible, but at least I get to criticize it. At least there are people within US is democracy that are criticizing it. I don't know if it's working. I may like it is maybe having an effect, but at least I can criticize it. The Uyghur Muslims, I get it. Like the USA would criticize, but the countries that China is in partnership with Pakistan, Sri Lanka, etc. We cannot speak against it because we rely on their funding, and if we speak against it, we're in trouble. But at least with USA, if even the our leaders criticize, because if you've been following our history, our leaders come and criticize US all the time. They do still take their loans, but at least they get to criticize it. Maybe uh, especially in the age of internet and all these social media, the um their place to suppress other countries or cause more oppression is getting limited, and there would be a time, I'm being a little optimistic in this, that they would have to think twice for making any um, outrageous kind of like decision where they're having or they're supporting proxy wars or they're going for another war. Like I agree that there was this need to uh, focus funds on the USA alone, but they had to retreat from China. You could still argue if it was the correct decision or not, but they were pressured into leaving Afghanistan. So I think that is one case where it did work. So I would want to live in a world where I can criticize it and hope that the next leader could fix it, or I could pressure the current government to fix it. And coming to Pakistan, yeah, it is a very good point that we aren't a homogeneous society. But to fix it, again, first of all, you need to understand the history why we're not a homogeneous society and yet we're living together. It has a lot to do with colonialism and how these borders were made. But even if we forget that for a second, I think the only solution is to have a secular state. And I don't think democracy, there is any other solution but democracy that could fix it. I don't like, again, I need to tell you that um, I'm not saying the democracy is this pill that you take and everything would be fixed, but it is the path where you take. It will have a lot of ups and downs, but it's your best bet, is what I'm saying.
I feel like there's a lot more we can talk about, but we're hitting our time. So we need to have like a part two of this if we remember about this. But I do want to continue on this later on because there is still a lot more we want to discuss, especially on what you mentioned about criticizing it. And this is what I want to leave it. So this is just my last point, and I will leave you have the last point because what my last point is a bit uh, uh I feel like on the edge. Then you can give me a little bit of your rebuttal, and then we try to close the conversation off. But amongst everything you said, I will pick just this out for now. That at least I get to criticize it. I don't see the value that has that is so important that you would give that more value over anything else, right? If it's about human lives, your right to criticize doesn't add any value. This country has been supporting a genocide of 30,000 people plus and counting. And just because you have a right to criticize it, and those American people have a right to criticize it, is not adding any value. They're not stopping anytime soon. They just came to a ceasefire that they're planning to do. This is just as of recording time. They just said it. That there will be a plan of ceasefire next Monday, but that is only during Ramadan. So they said during Ramadan we will do a ceasefire, and only in exchange for hostages. So basically, after Ramadan they might start again. And the US are completely fine with this. They're completely fine with just being a temporary ceasefire. This is an American soldier or an Air Force person actually burned himself alive in front of the Israeli embassy in the United States as a form of protest. Nothing, no news is covering it. Nothing has happened. Yes, people have talked about it, but it's not on the agenda as far as I've seen mainstream politics. Why? Because there's this. So a democratic society where you can have debate and everything can also be suppressed in different ways. So I don't see the value of this element being so important to choose a form of governance that doesn't work and is broken for a society like Pakistan. Again, I'm really bringing it back here because maybe for the US it works, maybe for Europe it works, but I can even debate there. It's also a problem. I sent you some numbers about how people are not happy with things that are happening in Europe as well, being in a democratic society. So this is the point I want to pick on for now only, and I want your thoughts on this about what I've said so far, and we'll try to push it to the closing.
Uh, yeah, I think again, like I pointed out, it's not like a one shop fix all thing. Like it's not like you start getting into democracy and all of your problems would be fixed. I know the problems would still exist, and like I think we argued about it in one of our previous podcasts as well, that as species we tend to learn after big mistakes as well. Like we would go into huge wars, kill millions and thousands of our people, and then we realize maybe wars are bad. So as species we do learn slow. So you have to realize, even though these democracies, even in the West, although they're old, I would argue even they aren't super mature. But there are certain occasions where having these pressure groups within these democratic countries has helped. For example, we often criticize that the Apple as a company makes a lot of things of the iPhone and other products of theirs are being made in China, and there's a lot of child labor over there, or there's a lot of exploitation over there. But because of this pressure that there was within the U.S. Democracy, they forced these companies and China itself that if they wouldn't follow these strict rules that Apple has in place, they wouldn't take these chips. I know it's still not perfect, and I keep hearing stories where there are still a lot of problems over there, but they're at least moving towards a place where these exploitations are ending. Uh, or you can take Pakistan, for example. We've all heard of the fact that we supply footballs for the whole country, we supply cricket balls for cricket World Cups, etc., etc. So we're well aware that there's child labor in Pakistan is very common, and most of these kids are used in making these, because these intricacies involved in these footballs and uh, hard balls that are used in cricket require small hands. It's very common that these children are used, but because there was pressure from US, they had to end it. Now there's, from what I've heard from my sources as well, there's very little to no child labor involved in Sialkot, where most of these sports equipment are made. Again, these victories are small compared to what you are mentioning, which is a full blown genocide. But I still think there has been improvement, and especially if you don't look at the US, you look at EU, and you're having living in US, Europe, you already know the changes have been much more positive than the US or other Western countries, for example. So I think uh, eventually countries do learn. It would take time. It would, even for Pakistan is far behind the other countries. I think it would take time, but eventually I don't think there's any other solution, especially for a country like Pakistan, which has had so many martial laws and so many authoritarian regimes. I don't think there's a better solution than democracy for us.
All right, I want to end it here. Agree with your point of views. I still disagree with some of them, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that I understand where you're coming from. I understand that the democratic process has some benefits. I'm not denying that. I'm not anti-democracy. I just feel like it's
Yeah.
a system that can improve, and I do feel like there are still more places we can improve it. It just feels like people don't want to have a conversation about this because they just feel like democracy is good enough for now. And as we're discussing right now, as we're trying to explore it further, that we do see holes in the democratic process everywhere around the world. So the champions of democracy need to come up with some answers, need to come up with some improvements rather than focusing on just like the process works, just go vote and it'll function. I feel like there's still a gap there, and I'm personally trying to figure out how we can close that gap, how we can improve the process further. I'm not to say one person deserves all the power. I just believe that every society goes through a natural order of change, and the mature democracies of the world went through quite a long time of authoritarian regimes in which they transition, not some in some cases peacefully, in quite a few cases not peacefully, from authoritarianism to an authoritarian parliamentarianism to full blown parliamentarianism. So it was a gradual change, and a country as young as Pakistan has been thrown into the world with a broken democratic system. Be like, this is the way to go. It is quite natural that we see martial laws and establishment coming in to take control, because in certain ways it feels like a natural order of things, and we need to get over it, but we need to find better processes of it. So that is how I would like to end it. But I still said a lot now, so I want to give you one final day, but we will try to make it short, and then we try to end the conversation. So any thoughts on that, Mudassir?
Uh, I think at the end of the day, for Pakistan's democracy to work, people actually really need to believe that the leader that they've chosen actually does represent their choice or does represent them, which is very hard for a country that is as polarized, as culturally different as Pakistan. But I would hate to say it, but Imran Khan sort of is becoming that person. Only if he wasn't a narcissist, which I think he is. I think it could have been a great time for Pakistan that someone that is so unanimously supported, I wouldn't say unanimous, but has a huge support, would come
Yeah.
to power and make decisions that all those harsh decisions that need to be taken, which again, this is something we both agree on, that taking power from the elites and distributing the power that they've held for so many years. Imran Khan could have been that messiah that we wanted, but unfortunately, he isn't. I don't think he ever would be.
Also, but in your own word, this is annoying because I want to stop it, but I can't. But this is, but you, in your own words, even if he turns out to be a narcissist who wants to control the power, if the people believe in him and he delivers value in the next 5 years, in your books he's still fine. Even if he tries to consolidate his own power, uh, but he's delivering enough that the people are still happy to choose him for re-election. In your books, that's still an okay leader then.
I'm fine with it. The problem is, as soon as he comes to power, he would want more power because, uh, from what I've understood about him or from what I've seen of him, he would want to push everyone on the edge. The army, the lawyers, or the judicial system altogether. That he gets to control the shots. And if somehow he does get that power, which is very much possible if he gets to power because he's against the army. So the only thing that is stopping him is the army. And if the army is pushed to the back foot, he would do things that would make sure his power is supreme to everything else. And that is the thing I fear, because he isn't a very smart guy that would listen to all his critiques and would listen to all those arguments that would go against what he wants. So whatever he want would be achieved, and that is that's that rings alarm bells for me, and it's dangerous for Pakistan in my
All right, well, that's it. I want to continue, but I want to stop. So I would thank you so much for your time. I think this is wonderful. We will have another discussion on it. I'm pretty sure about it, but we did want to cover the elections because it has been a mess, and there is a lot of debate about the current state of governance in Pakistan and in the world, especially with all the conflicts we're seeing. There's also a lot of other conflicts brewing in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in the Middle East, in Iran, in Syria still. So the world has never seen this much volatility in quite a long time. So I always struggle to believe that it's this prosperity because the rich are still getting richer, but the stability of the world is getting more unstable. So there is something going wrong in those processes and systems that we look up to. And I am very happy and thankful that you and I got to discuss a little bit about it today. there were some challenging notions. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how Pakistan governance works. I was wrong a lot about a few things, and I am happy that I got to learn today. So I really want to thank you, and I want to hope we get to meet again. We will, but maybe in a different format. So thank you so much, and have a nice sleep because I know how late it is there. Great. Thank you, everyone else, for listening. I will talk to you next time. Bye bye, and see you later.